Hello and welcome. This is a DIY terrain battle report. This battle report covers a Kings of War siege battle. We've been playing a lot of Kings of War lately and we decided to give Siege a go. For more information on how we did this Kings of War siege, please see the comments beneath this video. For our game we have two large teams. It makes up for about 11,500 point battle between Elves and Kingdom of Men defending, and Abyssal Dwarves, Undead, Orcs, and Goblins attacking. The setup here is pretty simple. It's a 7-turn Kings of War siege game where the attackers obviously need to destroy the defenders of the castle, and the defenders of the castle need to hold out as long as possible, preferably to the end of the game. The defenders are deployed 24 inches away from the castle. They happen to have 2 siege towers, a battering ram, ladders, and a couple of mantlets to siege this castle. The defenders have a large number of bolt throwers, a cannon, some trebuchets, and a hidden organ gun on the inside of the castle. Turn 1 was a pretty bland turn. The attackers mostly moved forward and advanced, getting themselves into position to get shot up. The only thing to really point out is that in this shot at the top of the screen you're going to see a large Abyssal Dwarf general on a winged something or other. That's all you're going to see of him. He dies very shortly after this. Turn 1 for the defenders was more exciting as everybody pretty much got to shoot since the attackers made a large advance forward towards the castle. They managed to turn the general for the Abyssal Dwarves into a pincushion, and he was out turn 1. He did not see any action. There were a few shots here and there elsewhere, but nothing as devastating as taking out a 300-point general in the first turn. Turn 2 for the attackers brought in a couple of units in close enough to start attacking the wall, but for the most part it brought them just within short distance shooting range for the defenders. But it did bring in some of the shooters on foot, especially for the Abyssal Dwarves. They were just one more turn out of range, getting very close and ready to start picking people off the wall. On the flank of the castle you'll see this large winged beast that's very close to the wall. He actually spends, starting next turn, a large amount of time smashing the wall, trying to break it down and get through. As you'll see later, he is eventually successful, even though it may actually take, I believe, 3 turns to get to that point. Turn 2 for the defenders was pretty straightforward. Basically it was, everyone open fire, hit whatever you can, soften as much as you can up, because the next turn for the defenders was likely to be the first of many brutal melee combats up on top of the wall here. Turn 3 for the attackers was a pretty bountiful turn. We have a siege tower that made it to the wall, the battering ram made it to the front entrance, the flank units made it to the side of the castle and began their ascent. We also managed to get some of our siege equipment to start hitting a pike phalanx on the inside corner of the wall to start breaking them up, as they were one of the formidable opponents on the inside. The idea was hopefully to take them out before we actually climbed over the wall and got ourselves into a lot of trouble. We thought to take advantage of having Undead on our team, where we had the Undead pushing the siege tower such that we could use our Necromancers to Dark Surge and move the unit closer each magic phase. Unfortunately, zombies pushing a tower did not turn out well. The Elves ended up holding combat for a long time. With the battering ram smashing at the door and the attackers at the foot of the wall, the defenders now have a great opportunity to use the braziers, which essentially was a feature we gave them in our custom rules, saying they have rocks, flaming arrows, etc., etc., that allow them to really beat up the attackers. They also have boiling oil pouring down upon the battering ram and the unit of skeletons pushing it. Turn 4 for the attackers turned out to be pretty eventful. Having damaged the door last turn, they finally managed to smash through, and an entire horde of skeletons made it to the other side. As you can see, We have both siege towers up to the door. Unfortunately, the zombies are still being held up by a lonely unit of elves, and a unit of orcs is finally made it to the other side, but they don't last long either. Turn 4 for the defenders didn't go so well. The unit of Abyssal Dwarves that made it over the wall survived a round of attacks. The unit of skeletons on the other side managed to also survive a round of shooting and attacks, and they ended up rolling snake eyes for nerve, meaning they were good to go for another round. As you can see in the painted siege tower, the elves are still holding out, not able to kill the unit of zombies, and the zombies aren't able to kill the elves either, so it's a kind of a stale combat. The king decided to fly out and meet some of the Abyssal Dwarves right in front of the gate, albeit a little too late for anything to really matter as he dies the next turn. Turn 5 saw quite a few more units make it up to the wall and start attacking the elven defenders that are up there. It also saw a lot of shooting from below the walls up towards the remaining units, such as quite a few elven archers, a couple of priestesses from the Kingdom of Men, and I think the cannon also got shot up a little bit. On the flank, the wall actually is taking quite a bit of damage and is very near destruction. Unfortunately, the way that siege weapons work out in Kings of War, they don't really do a whole lot of damage to the wall, so we ended up relying more on ground units to do the damage to the wall than anything else. Turn 5 went well for the defenders. They were able to destroy the unit of zombies up in the siege tower. They were able to hold off a large horde of orcs and waver a unit of Abyssal Dwarves that had ascended the wall. All in all, they did about as good as you could do, considering how many units were climbing up and over and starting to really wear down the units on the wall. Turn 6 started off with what appeared to be a pretty large momentum swing for the attackers. They managed to finally breach the flank wall. They got a large number of units over the wall completely and into hand-to-hand combat with a lot of the defenders that were on the ground waiting for pretty much the entire game to get engaged with somebody rather than just getting shot at sporadically. The siege tower, once occupied with zombies, is now occupied with some mummies, and they actually happen to hit pretty hard and are pretty much impossible to kill according to the rules. It turned out to be a great decision to have them go up there. Turn 6 for the defenders was a little bit shaky, as the horde of knights defending on the inside had to make a decision as to who to open their back to. Ultimately, they were exposing their back to either the gate or the wall that was smashed down, which is a pretty horrible decision. Fortunately for the defenders, they were able to take out most of the Abyssal Dwarves that had stormed the wall and made it completely over. In fact, they did so well that by the end of the game there really wasn't much Abyssal Dwarf left, and they'd done a pretty good number for the guys who had spilled through the door at this point. Turn 7 for the attackers turned out to be pretty fruitless. Despite the large number of enemies that were able to pour over the wall and get into combat, for the most part they ended up either drawing combat or being wavered by the end of it. Not the type of results you want after storming an entire castle, getting over the wall, and then kind of losing combat once you hit the ground on the inside. All those efforts weren't without their fruits. Obviously, we did manage to take out a horde of knights and a few other units on the way in, which is a victory in and of itself. However, it wasn't nearly enough to pull out a victory in this game. The defenders call it a victory in this game. They managed to hold out against all the enemies that poured over the wall. They definitely had the most intact units left on the inside of the wall and were in the best shape at the end of the game. Even though a wall was taken down, the siege towers certainly worked and were not destroyed. A lot of units died that were on the wall. They still held their ground and were still pretty well intact at the end of the game. It was a pretty impressive victory.